Hello, everybody. It is episode 12 of There's Treasure Inside Edition. It is March 4th, 2025. Another edition. We are joined by two hosts this week. We have, as always, the management. The management, how you doing?
Excellent. Super excited to be here for this week's episode.
And we have another host this week, a guest host who's very well known in the treasure hunting community, Copper Dan. Copper Dan, how are you doing this week?
I am freezing up here in Minnesota, and I hope you guys are warmer than I am. But it's we're getting there. March in Minnesota is our snowiest month of the year. But once we get to April, then we're looking to warmer temps.
And of course, everyone in the treasure hunter community right now, especially those working on There's Treasure Inside, is getting ready for the spring because the snow melts so they can go boots in the ground and find some treasure, correct? But give us a bit of a background on yourself, Copper Dan. Like I said earlier, you're well known in the treasure hunting community, but what's your history with treasure hunting?
So I got my start in treasure hunting in 2015 with the Forest Fen hunt. Before that, I had never even heard of treasure hunting. And one night on an episode of Expedition Unknown, this hunt called the Forest Fen hunt came on, and I watched it. And by the end of the episode, I had ordered my book, and I was off and running. It's been an incredible run.
Sounds like you haven't just been involved in treasure hunting, but you've been creating your own hunts, correct?
Yes.
Let's talk about that a little later because we want to ask you some questions about that, get inside the mind of a treasure hunt creator. And I wanted to apologize for last week. Sounds like my audio was not the best last week. I did listen to it as well. It kind of sounded like I was calling someone for a ransom demand with a towel wrapped over the phone like they used to in like the 60s. So apologies to everyone if that sounded a little muffled. But the management, what have you been up to this week?
I've actually been working on my own solves for once. So I do so much research for this and then just history research as well for the little details. But I need to start putting some pen to paper as the snow is thawing. And I am a believer of the Appalachian Trail or Appalachian Footpath box, excuse me, is in the southern states, North Carolina, Georgia, and the middle of March to May is when you start getting your noble hikers started. So all of those road points and crossing points where we're going to be looking at picking up the trail, that's where they get their busiest. Did have a boots in the ground request this week. One of our listeners reached out to me and said that he got good vibes and he wasn't going to be able to go boots on the ground with me. So he did share his ideas with me. I will not be sharing those ideas with anyone. But at this time, I didn't feel like it was concrete enough for me to want to go boots on the ground, but I think he's definitely on to something. I just needed more concrete facts to be able to really take the time out and go and do it. But I've got the itch so bad.
Well, a lot of people have talked about this as when do you feel like it's time to go and search for it? Like, at what point should you feel really confident? What about you, Copper Dan? Have you, in your previous experience with hunts, what's your vibe on that of when is it time to go boots on the ground?
I think it's never really a bad time to go if you have a good hunch on the area. So you definitely want to at least have it narrowed down to a smaller area. It's good to go visit that area because things look way different in person than they do on Google Earth.
Yeah, that's right. And when you go to the area, what you think you might just rule it out entirely or think about things you might want to do when you come back again another time to check it out.
Yep, I had a solve for the Forest Fen hunt that started in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and went up into the Tetons. And I had mapped this all out using Google Earth to my area, and my family and I drove out to Jackson Hole and spent the night and got up early the next morning and hit the trail. And it was within a matter of literally an hour, I realized there is absolutely no way an 80-year-old man hid this treasure here because the difficulty of where we were going and how far we had to go. it was like, yeah, this is an eye-opening from what you see on Google Earth to what you see when your boots on the ground. Two totally different things.
That's a really good point, which I hadn't thought of before. We talk a lot about researching to be able to get to a boots on the ground experience. I've never really thought about it being the other way around, where the boots on the ground may tell you you're on the wrong track from your research. You need to start somewhere else. So saving yourself time on the research side by going boots on the ground and getting a feel for whether it's really correct or not.
Plan a vacation, make fun out of it. So if you get there and your boots in the ground is, if you can just feel or clearly see that it's wrong, don't waste the trip. Make sure you've already planned some other fun events in the area. My family and I did not find the Fenn treasure on that very first hunt. It was a vacation we'll never forget. I mean, literally, since I was a little boy, I dreamt of hiking in the Rocky Mountains, and there I was in 2018, actually doing it, and it was everything I thought it would be. I mean, it was just the most beautiful, serene wilderness that you can imagine.
Well, there's actually some really exciting news this week, so I wanted to get into news of the week. Okay, so the big news of the week this week is there's been an announcement that there's going to be a Netflix documentary dropping on March 27th called Gold and Greed, and it's about the forest fen hunt that you were just talking about. So let's start with you, Copper Dan. Have you heard about this documentary coming up?
Oh yes,
Do you know anything about it yet?
I know a bunch of the people that are in it, became friends with some of them. I've known about that this has been in the works for years, and to finally see it coming out, I'm so excited to see how they're going to spin it, I guess is the word. The story that they're going to tell out of it. I trust that Netflix did a very good job. I don't know if it's going to tell us the answers that we're looking for, but I think for the vast majority out there that maybe have never heard of the Fenn hunt, it's going to tell a good story.
For those of us joining for the first time and haven't heard about the forest fen hunt, as a bit of a summary, there seems to be some sort of controversy at the end of the hunt about whether the person who found the treasure was told about where it was, whether it was moved. So there's quite a bit of controversy for it. So I believe what Copper Dan's talking about is whether there's going to be answers to some of those questions that people had. It's interesting that it's a treasure hunt, which is kind of a mystery in itself. But this particular treasure hunt, one of the biggest ones that was ever made up until that point, had a lot more mystery involved at the very end of how it ended. Would you summarize it like that, Copper Dan?
Yeah, I think a lot of us have a word for the ending. I don't know if I can say it on your channel.
You can say it.
It sucked. No, it was even worse than that. Obviously, I can say it sucked, but yeah, there was just it just literally ended, and there was no who found it, where the hell is it, what was it, and it literally one day just ended. We were promised some answers. Those answers, they never came the way we wanted them, and the finder, Jack, wasn't talking, and respectively, he had good reason not to talk. So I was, as far as I know, the only treasure hunter to get to go out and personally meet and chat with them.
And what was that about? What was the purpose of that meeting?
So the purpose, I came up with an idea. So I had in the forest fen hunt, there was a large benchmark wall map. I had purchased one of these maps. I met Forrest. I had him sign a couple of them, and first we didn't know who even found the treasure. Well, eventually the name came out, and Jack came out to the community, and I asked him if he would be willing to sign the map, and he said, "Oh, he'd be honored to." And so it was just picking a time and a place, and we eventually got that squared away. And I actually flew out to New York, and we met at an airport that he was flying through, and I flew into just to meet him to get him to sign this map, which eventually I made a really neat frame for, and we auctioned it off for we made almost, I was close to 30,000. If memory serves, it was around $27,000 is how much we raised for, and then all the money went to St. Jude's.
Wow. That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. That is many, many times more than I thought we would raise.
Who did you raise the money for, sorry?
St. Jude's
Oh,
Children's
great.
Hospital.
Great. And I'm understanding that you're known for being a great philanthropist, Copper Dan. Is that your charity you donate to the most?
It is.
That's great. I'm great. That's great you're doing that for the community.
Thank you.
Yeah, I feel the pain of the original searchers that feel like there was foul play, and I feel a lot of attachment still to that. I see it in the forums. I've had discussions about it. There's just a lot left open-ended, but they're also very dedicated to what it seems like the word of truth, right? Like Forrest Fenn and his hunt is like the holy grail of hunts. So they tie everything that Jon Collins-Black is doing, which was obviously inspired by Fenn, back to Finn's teachings or what they learned from Finn's hunt. And I'm not sure if that's the greatest confirmation bias ever or the greatest advantage ever, but I feel like it's one end of the spectrum or the other.
One thing as a treasure hunt creator we've learned is that I think you owe it to your searchers, people searching for your treasure, an answer when the hunt does end.
The Forrest Fenn hunt was the first of its kind, though. I don't think that there were any treasure hunts before that. So, like, now we're learning lessons as other hunts are being built. And for those listening, There's Treasure Inside is not the only treasure hunt out there. There's all kinds of them being created after this Netflix show comes out. I'm sure even more of them are going to be created. This is just the beginning of this as a hobby. So feel free to jump in anytime.
I didn't think anyone after Forrest, I didn't think there would be another hunt of that magnitude. It'll be hard to replicate.
Well, I do like to look to the future, and that's the thing. It's like a relationship. We've got a new hunt now. We're in the honeymoon phase, so to speak, where everyone's excited about this treasure inside. And to be fair, this treasure inside is actually much bigger than the Forest Fan hunt in terms of dollar value, 5 different boxes. Everyone's really excited about it. I think everyone though is just really hoping they can trust Jon Collins-Black that the clues that are being put out there are good. It's not a really terrible hunt. It's solvable, and everyone's got a lot of trust right now. I think that's why everyone's really wanting to see that first box found so they can get an idea of what the hunt is like and have some confidence that's a really good hunt. I get the feeling that the Forest Fen hunt was almost like a marriage that went over many years and has ended now. And some people have really fond memories, some people have some bad memories from the end. I do like to look towards the future. And I think the best thing about this documentary is who knows how popular it might be. It might be not that popular, no one's really heard of it. It might be insanely popular, where we just get an explosion of people getting into this treasure inside and joining this community. I, for one, would much rather it bring a whole bunch of new people in to get really excited about treasure hunting. I don't know what is more fun than finding treasure, just like in the pirate tales, digging up or finding treasure worth all this money. It's so exciting, and I think it'd be really fun if a whole lot more people get involved in it.
Well, that's kind of how you got started in treasure hunting, right? And now you have treasure hunt token, and we've been so wrapped up getting to know Copper Dan that we forgot to ask what you've been working on this week.
Well, I will talk about treasure hunt token to go through that quickly. So we had 2 weeks ago, our code for the hunt was beat Jim because Jim Wygand picked up the first 2 treasure hunt tokens prizes. Someone else got it the week after that, but guess what? We need to beat Jim again because Jim wanted to get.
No!
Jim, he's got 3 out of 4. Okay, so the treasure hunt last week was, again, relatively simple. There was a crow there standing with the golf club, and all you had to do was go to golfcrow.com, and there was a clue just below the first picture there saying scoring made simple. That was the answer for this week's treasure hunt. So let's do another one for this week. Let's do $20 this time, and we've got to come up with a code. Maybe Copper Dan could help us with a code. We just need any code, Copper Dan, for this week's treasure hunt. Can you think of any code we could use?
Hopper?
Copper. Let's do copper. Okay, so the code this week will be copper, COPPER. That's going to be the code this week. We'll put a link to the treasure hunt in the show notes. It'll be a brand new treasure hunt for $20, and we probably should have done Big Jim again, but let's see if someone else can beat Jim this time and pick up the money. Jim is cleaning up for probably a few minutes of work each week, so we need other people to get that money.
Jim is financing his boots on the ground trip with treasure hunt token.
It sounds like it. It definitely sounds like it. I wanted to go through something else this week. In fact, I've wanted to go through it the last week or two. I mentioned to everyone when I was driving to Las Vegas, I listened to the audio version of Ready Player One. When I was listening to that, it was a very interesting that in the story itself, the character that's trying to find the egg, essentially the treasure hunt within the story, the first clue that he finds that because a particular journal in the story has notches taken out of particular letters in that journal. And when he looks at each of those letters and the ones that have notches taken out of them, like little chunks taken out of the letters, he puts together a phrase which allows him to find the first clue. Now, on top of that, the actual book Ready Player One, written by the author, Ernest Cline, that book also, from a meta perspective, also had notches taken out of particular letters that led people to a website. And when they went to that website, they were asked to play a particular game. And when they did well at that game, they got some sort of prize. And I was thinking, wouldn't it be really cool if there's treasure inside as an homage to Ready Player One, because it's mentioned in the book, also had letters with notches taken out of them, right? Well, it turns out it does. So, Mysterious Writings will put the link of the video into the show notes, put together a video actually finding letters within this treasure inside that had notches taken out of them. Here's the thing though, if you put those letters together, it doesn't mean anything. If there's just a bunch of letters put together, but there's maybe, I don't know, something like 10 or 15 letters in the book that have these notches taken out of them, especially in the titles of the chapters. But a very fascinating thing because, in my opinion, there's no chance that's just random. Wanted to get your two thoughts on that. Is there a chance that this is just something that was random with the publishing, or do you think this is a clue in the book?
I'm going to go with everything that Jon Collins-Black does has intent, just based on the things that I'm finding in places they shouldn't be.
How about you, Copper Dan? What's your thoughts on that as a treasure hunt creator?
I would agree. I would take everything as intent and jump down the rabbit hole.
I think it was really clever. Really clever that the fact is, within Ready Player One, there was this series of notches. The book itself had notches, and then Jon Collins-Black's done the same thing in his book. So I think that's really exciting. As I said, we'll put a link to the video so you can check that out as well.
Let's focus back on Copper Dan for a second, since we've got this special guest here with us. So you were obviously inspired by the Finn hunt to create your own hunt, and I did a little bit of a intentionally failed experiment this week where I went through your treasure hunt that was called Turning Copper into Gold, the Magic Box. And I made a YouTube video that'll go along and be a visual and give everybody the details. But I just kind of wanted to ask you questions about how you went about creating that hunt and get inside your mind as a treasure hunter. So what initially inspired you to make your own hunt? You're like, I'm doing it. I want to, contribute to this community. What really got you going?
So, of course, it started with the fan hunt. And then, there was a lot of smaller hunts popping up. And it just, one day I went, I want to do this. I want to make my own hunt. And Forrest had put it in an area that he said was very special to him. And I happened to have one of those areas. So it started with the end. I knew where I wanted it to end. So I just needed to figure out, how do I get people from a beginning point to that end point? And then it was, well, how do I get them to the beginning point? So it was I wanted a treasure box. So I knew someone in the treasure hunting community that did 3D printing, and he had made his own treasure boxes. So between him and I, we designed a really neat looking magic box. And then inside of it, I wanted the person that opened it to feel so much joy and happiness and excitement. But yet I was also bound to, I'm not a multimillionaire. So I self-funded this thing. So what was inside of it was a bunch of copper coins, some silver coins, and then one gold coin. And the premise of the hunt was how to turn copper into gold. So it was like the copper coins would eventually turn into gold coins. And it only started off with one gold coin. What my original plan was on this hunt, as people bought into it and enough people paying to get into the hunt, I would take that money and just go buy more gold coins.
Yes, I'm curious to know, like, when you're designing this thing, how long did it take to design the hunt?
I guess it would probably, from the initial thought of doing it to the very end, was for me was about a year. I found I've never written anything before really, but I found that I wouldn't say I have a gift, but I found I really enjoyed the writing process. So, and I just kept adding and tweaking it. And really, it was like by the time I was done, I created this really neat thing. It's got a king and a copper princess. You know, once I got to writing it and I felt the fairy tale part of it and almost like something a kid would want to do, I ran with that.
Well, I think the fun part for our audience is to get inside the mind of a creator and what it's like to be on the other side of the hunt, of being the creator of the hunt. So you've put together this fairy tale story. You're having a lot of fun with it before anyone's even seen any of it, correct? And then you launch the hunt. And how long did the hunt take from start to finish?
So here's the embarrassing part. I would love to tell you it took years. I would love to tell you it took months, even days. It took hours.
Are you serious? It took hours?
Yeah, it was. It only takes one or two small errors in a hunt, and I would tell you there are some really good treasure hunters out there.
So that's the part that's really interesting, though, right? Is designing a hunt the right difficulty. Jon Collins-Black has talked about this. He said he doesn't know how hard it would be. He feels like it would take several years, but maybe not. So can you talk us through that specific, or was there something in there that you thought was going to be very difficult, but ended up being a little easier than you thought?
Yes. So the king in the hunt, his name is King Michigig. Dan, where did you come up with that silly name? Michigig anagrams into Gitchi Gumi. So anybody that knows anything about Lake Superior knows Gitchi Gumi is kind of an Indian word for big lake. So the hunt launched within a matter of a couple of hours. Somebody recognized Michigig anagrammed into Gitchi Gumi. They knew, oh my God, that's Lake Superior. And then there was a coin that I had designed and had made. In the back of the coin has a compass on it, and it had the year 1952, and it had a triangle. And what that was for is on the top of where the treasure was hidden, on the top of Carlton Peak, up the north shore of Lake Superior in Minnesota, there was a geomarker, and that was the blaze you were looking for. When you found this blaze, you laid the coin in it, you lined it up, and there was an arrow on the back of the coin that pointed you to where the treasure was. And I believe the last one of the last lines in the poem, it said like 25 or 30 steps from the blaze, and then you just followed a straight line. So somebody recognized the back of that coin to be a potential to be a geomarker. So once they knew the basic location, they were able to go online and find where the geomarker was. So all the clues in between on the poem, none of them mattered anymore. They found the end.
So did they somehow get almost like a shortcut to the clue, to the final location?
All the clues, these great clues that I wrote that I thought, I hope these aren't too hard. None of them suddenly mattered anymore. But what was really, really cool is the guys that went up and found it. It was a team of treasure hunters. They're from Minnesota, from the Minneapolis area. They figured it out, as well as there was a bunch of teams that did. They happened to be the closest that were literally like could almost drop what they were doing, jump in their car, drive 6 hours, go hiking, and find it. They made a video of it, and they were like, I made these grown men like little kids jumping up and down.
That's
That made it all worth it.
But that's great. I think it's a really good thing you put together that hunt and gave happiness to the community.
Did we talk about how much the total prize value was?
About $5,000.
Oh wow.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't. How many? Let's see. I kind of went over it quickly. I said some copper, some silver, and one gold coin. So the gold coin was a 1 ounce eagle, so it was worth about maybe $1,800. And the silver double eagles were 80 of them, and those were worth like 40 around then at the time, I
Oh,
believe.
wow.
So can I tell the story about when I went and hit it?
Sure.
So it was December 9th. Sadly, so my grandfather passed away between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And if you remember around 2020, there was this thing called COVID. So his funeral was December 9th of 2020. So I was going up to his funeral, which unfortunately had to be a family only thing. I was like, this, my grandpa was such a great guy. He would have had 1,000 people at his funeral, and he just happened to die at the one time when that unfortunately couldn't happen. But anyways, from where I live in Minnesota to northern Minnesota is about 5 or 6 hours. So on my way up there, I swung way out of my way up the north shore of Lake Superior. It was already, winter. There was already a couple of feet of snow on the ground up there. So I had all my winter gear in my backpack. Got to the base of the peak that I was going to climb. Been up there many, many times, but I had found the place 25 years prior with my wife on our first anniversary, and hiked up there and instantly fell in love with the place. It's the tallest, one of the tallest peaks in Minnesota, and the view is just gorgeous. So I went up there and brought my winter gear, and it's about a 45-minute hike climb to the top. And I'd been up there prior to that in the fall when I was scoping it out, and I found the place that I wanted to put it. And so I got there, and it was just such a surreal experience when I, put this treasure, and it wasn't a proxy item. I mean, you were going to find, the person that found this was going to find a box filled with all this stuff. So I buried it. It wasn't really buried in the sense of buried, but it was secreted. And then I covered my tracks on the way out, and then we launched the hunt about a month after that.
So, as a treasure hunt creator, is there anything you can think of that would assist people doing There's Treasure Inside? What would you be thinking differently as a treasure hunt creator when you're doing There's Treasure Inside? Is there anything you can assist people with of how Jon Collins-Black may be thinking when he's making this hunt?
After I did this, I started looking at other hunts I was working on, and what you just said, think about it as from the perspective of the person of like Jon Collins-Black. What makes sense to on you just like say a hiding area, think about that area. Does it make sense to put something there? If he can come up with how he created these clues, then you can possibly come up with the same thoughts.
But Dan, is there anything else you think would be useful for people to know as a treasure hunt creator? Or anything else you wanted to talk about tonight?
So put yourself in the mind of the creator. That's what I've always done. Just try to think like the creator does. How would you have laid the book out, put the clues in the book? How would you have hidden the clues in the book? And you may get lucky, and you may find some stuff because maybe Jon thought like you, or you were able to think like Jon.
I think that's a really good idea. I think probably there's some luck involved, but why not you? Why not be the person who's reading the book? Be the person that's thinking along the same lines as the author of the treasure hunt is as well. That's probably where the most success is going to come from, is aligning yourself the most with their thoughts, but also probably trying a bunch of different stuff as well, right? If you try a lot of different things, you have a lot more chance of being successful in getting along the same mindset as them.
One thing, a treasure hunter creates a treasure hunt to be solved in a particular way. but sometimes they're blinded to not see that there's another way to solve their own hunt. So sometimes you might just get lucky by solving it in an unconventional way that the treasure hunt creator didn't even think of.
Sounds like you have some PTSD from your own hunt. That's what you're thinking about. Well, I think that's a really good summary of someone who's created a hunt before and how to get inside the mind of a treasure hunt creator as well. And we've gone overtime again this week. Had a really good chat with you, Dan. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And
Thanks for-
management, have you got anything exciting happening this week?
I'm releasing the video I made not solving Copper Dan's already solved hunt. So if you want to see why I am not a qualified person to be telling you how to solve a treasure hunt, please check out my YouTube video. But also I just made it because I just wanted to encourage people, like, there's only going to be so few people that are actually going to be right about this. Don't be afraid to be wrong. It's just about having fun. And I think creators like Copper Dan and Jon Collins-Black and Forrest Finn agree that this is about fun and learning and enjoying. It's not always the destination, it's the journey.
And I wanted to say, please, everyone, if you want to support this podcast, please subscribe to the podcast. Give us a 5-star review. If your hand is near your phone right now, just pick it up and go do it. It will only take a couple seconds. And Copper Dan is, I believe, you're a well-known artist in the copper world as well. Is there anything you'd like to share? Is there places people could go to check out your art or anything else you wanted to show?
Sure. So yeah, that's where the name Copper Dan comes from. I'm not a cop. I am a copper artist. And if you go to copperelements.info, you can see what my wife and I do.
Sounds great. It's going to be another big week in the treasure hunting world. Everyone's getting ready for this big documentary. I'm actually curious, curious about the documentary itself for sure, but the reaction to the documentary is what I'm really looking forward to. So that's only a few weeks away. Things are getting closer and really heating up in the treasure hunting world. But you both have a good week, and we'll speak to you all next week.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.